From the once powerful cartel leader whose family believes he is being tortured in a U.S. prison, to the drug lord who suffered multiple illnesses while being held in the U.S., cartel leaders are subjected to all kinds of harsh treatment while in prison. In this video, I will be pulling back the curtains on the experiences of cartel leaders who are incarcerated in the U.S. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The capture of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman on January 8, 2016, marked the beginning of the end for one of the world's most notorious drug lords. After years of evading authorities, El Chapo was finally arrested by Mexican Marines in a dramatic raid in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. Following his capture, the Mexican government faced pressure from the United States to extradite Guzman. The U.S. had long wanted to bring him to justice for his role in flooding American streets with drugs and carrying out countless acts of violence. El Chapo's legal team fought tooth and nail to prevent his extradition, filing numerous appeals and injunctions. Despite their efforts, the Mexican judiciary system moved forward, and on January 19, 2017, Guzman was extradited to the United States. His trial began on November 5, 2018, in the Eastern District of New York and lasted for 3 months. After 6 days of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict on February 12, 2019. El Chapo was found guilty on all 17 counts, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder. On July 17, 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. The judge also ordered him to forfeit $12.6 billion, the estimated profits from his drug empire. Following his sentencing, El Chapo was transferred to ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Colorado, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, ADX. Florence is designed to house the most dangerous criminals in the United States. This facility is infamous for its extreme security measures and harsh living conditions. El Chapo is currently living in a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell, where he spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. The cell is soundproof to prevent communication between inmates, adding to the sense of isolation. The basic necessities, such as a bed, desk, and chair, are all made of concrete and attached to the walls, ensuring that they cannot be moved or used as weapons. The cell also has a tiny window that offers no view of the surrounding Rocky Mountains. This restricted view prevents inmates from knowing their exact location within the prison. For 1 hour each day, El Chapo is allowed to leave his cell for recreation. However, this is not the typical outdoor exercise yard one might imagine. Instead, he is taken to a concrete pit that resembles an empty pool. The pit is designed to prevent inmates from seeing their surroundings, further isolating them from the outside world. In addition to the general hardship inmates at ADX Florence are forced to endure, El Chapo's wife has also come out to say that he is being slowly tortured behind bars to the point that his blood pressure is at an all-time high and she is afraid for his life. Chapo himself has also referred to his time in ADX Florence as torture. El Chapo is forced to manage a health condition behind bars, but his suffering pales when compared to this next drug lord. Gilberto Rodriguez Orejuela. Gilberto Rodriguez. Orejuela's journey into the dark world of crime began in the 1970s, a time when Colombia was rapidly becoming the center of the global drug trade. The 1970s marked the formation of the Cali Cartel, a group of drug trafficking gangs organized by Gilberto, his brother Miguel, Jose Santa Cruz Londono, and Helmer Herrera. Gilberto, known for his calculated and strategic mind, earned the nickname El Ajedrecista, or the chess player. The Cali Cartel initially focused on marijuana, but soon branched out into the more profitable cocaine trade during the 1980s. It was estimated that in their prime, they controlled about 80% of the American and 90% of the European cocaine markets. After the demise of Pablo Escobar, the Colombian government turned its attention to taking down the Cali cartel. In the summer of 1995, President Ernesto Samper sent out a joint task force codenamed Search Block, formed by top police and elite commandos. This task force declared an all-out war against the drug cartels. On June 9, 1995, Gilberto was arrested by the Colombian National Police during a dramatic house raid in Cali. The raid was meticulously planned, and Gilberto was found hiding in a secret compartment behind a TV. In October 2002, Gilberto was freed by a judicial order citing good behavior and participation in work-study programs. However, his freedom was short-lived. In March 2003, he was rearrested by Colombian authorities in Cali on new charges that he was running the cartel from prison. Following his rearrest, the Colombian government faced increasing pressure from the United States to extradite him. The United States had long warned to bring Gilberto to justice for his role in flooding American streets with cocaine. In December 2004, Gilberto was extradited to the United States. His brother, Miguel Rodriguez Orihuela, was also arrested and extradited to the United States. The brothers faced a series of charges, including conspiracy to import cocaine and money laundering. On September 26, 2006, both Gilberto and Miguel pleaded guilty to charges of conspiring to import cocaine into the United States. The brothers forfeited $2.1 billion in illegal profits, and the United States did not charge 6 of their relatives with money laundering and obstructing justice. They were both sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, in November that year, they both received an additional 87 months in prison. The 2 prison terms were set to run concurrently. Rodriguez Orihuela was sent to serve his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution, Bootner, a medium security facility in North Carolina. While in prison, Gilberto suffered from a series of health issues, including 2 heart attacks, colon and prostate cancer, and COVID. Although there's no evidence to back up the claims, some believe that Gilberto was not given the best possible care behind bars. Eventually, on May 31, 2022, he died at a prison medical center in Butner, North Carolina, at the age of 83. The cause of death was lymphoma, according to a statement released by the family. Up next is a drug lord who is likely to spend the rest of his days enduring the same fate as El Chapo. Dario Antonio Usuga David. Dario Antonio Usuga David, better known by his alias Otonio, was born on September 15, 1971, in the northwestern region of Colombia. His early life was marked by poverty and limited opportunities, which is common among those born in rural Colombia. Dario's affiliation to organized crime began in 2005 when he started working for Daniel Rendon Herrera, the leader of the Los Urabenos drug trafficking group. Los Urabenos, also known as the Gulf Clan, was one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Colombia. Otonio became the leader of the Gulf Clan in 2009 after his brother Giovanni was killed in a police raid. Under Otonio's leadership, the Gulf Clan expanded its operations and influence. They were involved in everything from drug trafficking to illegal mining and human trafficking. His actions earned him the title of the most violent and significant Colombian drug trafficker since Pablo Escobar, according to New York federal prosecutors. The Gulf Clan under Otonio's command was responsible for a huge portion of the cocaine that flowed into the United States and Europe. Otonio managed to evade capture for many years, but Colombian authorities did not stop until he was apprehended. In 2015, the BBC reported that 1,200 Colombian anti-drug police officers were involved in the manhunt for Otonio. The U.S. Department of State offered a $5 million reward for information leading to Otonio's arrest, and Colombian anti-trafficking police dropped flyers from helicopters offering the same reward. Despite these efforts, Otonio remained at large, using his extensive network of informants and safe houses to stay one step ahead of the authorities. In October 2021, Colombian military forces captured Otonio in a remote mountainous area. At the time of his arrest, he was the most wanted drug lord in Colombia. He was then extradited to the United States in May 2022. In August 2023, Otonio was sentenced to 45 years in prison in New York. U.S. District Judge Dora Irizarry, who was in charge of his sentencing, revealed that he had shipped nearly 100,000 kilograms of cocaine into the United States while serving as the leader of the Gulf Clan. Otonio's capture, extradition, and sentencing marked the end of an era of terror for many in Colombia and beyond. He is currently confined within the walls of ADX Florence, the same prison that houses El Chapo. He is also being subjected to the same harsh treatment and isolation. While Otonio was operating in Colombia, this next cartel leader was wreaking havoc in Mexico. Jose Maria Guizar Valencia. Jose Maria Guizar Valencia's journey into the dark world of organized crime began early, and he quickly rose through the ranks of the infamous Los Zetas cartel. Guizar Valencia's rise to power within the cartel was quick as he earned the trust of the cartel's top leaders, including Heriberto Lascano, known as Z3, and Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, known as Z40. As a top leader in Los Zetas, Guizar Valencia was responsible for overseeing the cartel's drug distribution. Operating primarily in Guatemala, Guizar Valencia was responsible for overseeing ton-quantity shipments of cocaine from Guatemala to Mexico. He coordinated the transportation of the cocaine from southern Mexico to Coahuila, Mexico, ensuring that the drugs reached their final destinations in the United States. The scale of his operations was huge, with millions of dollars in United States currency flowing through his hands, used to pay for further cocaine shipments. Guizar Valencia's criminal activities were not limited to drug trafficking. He was also deeply involved involved in firearms trafficking and bulk cash smuggling. The money obtained from the sale of cocaine in the United States was used to purchase firearms, which were then smuggled into Mexico to arm the cartel's soldiers. The investigation into Guizar Valencia's activities began in January 2010, when law enforcement authorities started to uncover the inner workings of the Los Zetas cartel. Despite being under indictment and on the run for many years, Guizar Valencia managed to evade capture. However, his luck eventually ran out on February 9, 2018, when Mexican authorities and the military arrested him in Mexico City. Following his arrest, Guizar Valencia waived extradition and was sent to the United States to face the charges against him. On December 20, 2021, Guizar Valencia pleaded guilty to conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute 5 kilograms or more of cocaine and conspiracy to commit money laundering. On November 15, 2022, U.S. District Judge Richard A. Schell sentenced Guizar Valencia to 480 months in federal prison. Being placed in a federal prison means that Guizar will be surrounded by people who have committed similar crimes, and while some of them may be his allies, others may be vengeful enemies. Guizar will not be getting out anytime soon, but the same cannot be said for this next cartel boss. Eduardo Arellano Felix. Eduardo Arellano Felix was born and raised in Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico. Alongside his brothers Benjamin, Ramon, and Javier, and his sister Enadina, Eduardo would rise to power as a key figure in the Tijuana cartel. Eduardo, known as El Doctor due to his medical background, was not just another foot soldier in the cartel. His intelligence and strategic mind set him apart, making him one of the most notorious members of the Arellano Felix organization. The Tijuana cartel quickly became one of the most powerful and violent drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. The cartel's operations were large-scale and complex, involving the smuggling of thousands of tons of marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine into the United States. Eduardo played an important role in these operations, using his knowledge to improve the cartel's smuggling techniques. Eduardo was involved in planning the cartel's logistics, ensuring that drugs moved smoothly across the border and that money flowed back into the organization's accounts. His ability to evade law enforcement and maintain the cartel's operations made him a valuable asset to his brothers. The Tijuana cartel was notorious for its brutality. Under the leadership of Eduardo and his brothers, the cartel was responsible for countless murders, kidnappings, and acts of violence. Ramon Arellano Felix, known as the most ruthless of the siblings, led the cartel's enforcement arm, carrying out hits on rivals and anyone who threatened their operations. Eduardo, while not as publicly violent as Ramon, was deeply involved in the planning and execution of these violent acts. Despite the constant attempts by law enforcement to shut down their operations, Eduardo and his siblings managed to maintain their grip on the Tijuana cartel for years. After years of evading law enforcement, Eduardo's luck finally ran out. In October 2008, the Mexican Federal Police, acting on a tip-off, closed in on his location in Tijuana, Baja California. Eduardo, who had been wanted by Interpol in 180 countries, was a high-value target. The U.S. State Department had offered a staggering $5 million reward for information leading to his arrest. As the police approached, Eduardo did not go down without a fight. Despite having his 11-year-old daughter near him, he engaged in a shootout with the authorities, but in the end, he was captured. In the days following his arrest, Eduardo was held in a high-security facility in Mexico. The legal proceedings began, and the U.S. authorities quickly moved to request his extradition. Eduardo faced charges of money laundering and drug trafficking in the United States. On September 1, 2012, Eduardo Arellano Felix was extradited to the United States to face charges of money laundering and drug trafficking. He was the last Arellano Felix brother named in a 2003 indictment to be extradited. On August 18, 2013, he was sentenced to 15 years in a U.S. federal prison. After having completed 8 years in the U.S., Eduardo was deported back to Mexico in August 2021 and immediately sent to the Federal Social Readaptation Center, No. 1 maximum security prison in Almoloya de Juarez, state of Mexico. Up next is a cartel boss who went from being feared by all to serving a 4-decade-long sentence. Francisco Hernandez Garcia. By the early 2000s, Hernandez Garcia had become one of the top leaders of the Los Zetas cartel, alongside figures like Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, known as Z40, and Heriberto Lascano, Z3. Garcia's role was important in expanding the cartel's operations, particularly in drug trafficking. Under Hernandez Garcia's leadership, the cartel established a complex network that ensured the smooth transportation of large quantity shipments of cocaine from Guatemala to Mexico. From there, the drugs were distributed distributed throughout the United States, generating millions of dollars in revenue. It is estimated that the Los Zetas cartel, under Hernandez Garcia's leadership, moved several thousand kilograms of cocaine into the United States, flooding the streets with the deadly drug. The millions of dollars generated from drug sales in the United States were funneled back to Mexico, where they were used to fund further criminal activities. Hernandez Garcia's rise within the Los Zetas cartel was marked by violence and ruthlessness. His leadership style was brutal, and he was known for his willingness to use violence to achieve his goals. This made him a feared figure within the cartel and a top target for law enforcement. In January 2010, law enforcement authorities began an extensive investigation into the Los Zetas cartel's activities. Hernandez Garcia was identified as a key player in the cartel. The Drug Enforcement Administration and the Department of Homeland Security investigations spearheaded the operation, working tirelessly to gather evidence and build a case against Garcia and his associates. The search for Garcia lasted a few years, as he was a master in the art of evading capture. However, in 2014, a coordinated raid was launched to capture Garcia. The operation involved multiple agencies and took place in several locations. On December 20th, 2021, Garcia pleaded guilty to the charges laid against him. U.S. District Judge Richard A. Schell presided over the case, ensuring that justice would be served. Hernandez Garcia was eventually sentenced to 480 months in federal prison. Hernandez Garcia is serving a lengthy sentence, but it pales in comparison to the time this next drug lord is to spend behind bars. Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez. Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez, born on August 1, 1972 in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, Mexico, began his career far from the world of organized crime. Initially, he served as a municipal police officer in Matamoros from 1992 to 1995. However, he soon decided to walk down a more dangerous path. Sanchez left his position in law enforcement and joined the Gulf Cartel in late 1990s. Under the mentorship of Ociel Cardenas Guillon, the then leader of the Gulf Cartel, Sanchez quickly rose through the ranks. Known for his fearless nature, he became a trusted lieutenant within the organization. Sanchez was involved in various criminal activities, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and violent confrontations. His reputation for brutality and efficiency earned him several aliases, including El Cos, Costi, Sombra, and George Natex. In 1999, Sanchez's criminal activities caught the attention of U.S. law enforcement. In a dramatic incident, Sanchez and other cartel members were involved in a standoff with DEA and FBI agents in Matamoros. Armed with AK-47 rifles, they pointed their weapons at the agents and threatened to kill them. Due to this incident, Sanchez was indicted in the United States for drug trafficking activities and for threatening U.S. law enforcement officials. In 2009, Sanchez was sanctioned under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act by the United States Department of the Treasury. This act prohibited any business activity with him and froze his assets in the U.S., further tightening the noose around his criminal empire. In September 2012, Sanchez was arrested by the Mexican Navy in a carefully planned operation. He was surprisingly captured without firing a single bullet. In 2015, after spending nearly 3 years in Mexican custody, Sanchez was extradited to the United States. The extradition process was lengthy and complex, involving negotiations between the Mexican and U.S. governments. Upon his arrival in the United States, Sanchez faced a series of charges, including drug trafficking, money laundering, murder, and assault. The U.S. government accused him of being one of the principal leaders of the Gulf Cartel, responsible for smuggling vast quantities of cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine into the United States. The indictment also detailed his involvement in violent confrontations with law enforcement officials, including the infamous 1999 standoff in Matamoros. In 2022, after a lengthy legal process, Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez was sentenced to life in prison. The judge also ordered him to pay a forfeiture judgment of $5 million, representing a fraction of the huge profits generated by his drug trafficking activities. Up next is a cartel boss who was taken into custody in the most unexpected way imaginable. Hector Palma Salazar. Hector Luis Palma Salazar began his life of crime as a car thief, a petty criminal looking for a way out of his tough circumstances. However, Palma's ambitions were far greater than stealing cars. His criminal activities soon caught the attention of the Guadalajara Cartel, one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in Mexico at the time. The cartel was led by the infamous Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. Gallardo saw potential in the young Palma and recruited him as a gunman. This was the beginning of Palma's ride in the world of of organized crime. Palma quickly proved his worth to Gallardo. His ruthlessness made him an invaluable asset to the cartel. Palma broke away from the Guadalajara cartel in the late 1980s. He contacted Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia, forming an alliance that would eventually lead to the creation of the Sinaloa cartel. This new cartel quickly became one of the most powerful and feared drug trafficking organizations in the world. Palma's criminal empire continued to expand, but his luck was about to run out. On June 23, 1995, Palma's life took another dramatic turn. He was flying in a 12-seat Lear jet to attend a wedding party when the plane crash-landed. The jet was traveling from Ciudad Obregón, Sonora to Guadalajara, Jalisco, but was diverted and unable to locate a new landing strip in time. Palma survived the crash, but his days of evading the law were about to end. Palma had been traveling in full uniform as a federal judicial police officer, complete with identification and an armed caravan of PJF personnel. However, this time his luck ran out. Mexican military officers arrested him at the crash site. Following his arrest, Palma was extradited to the United States, where he faced charges related to his extensive drug trafficking operations. In the end, Palma was sentenced to serve 19 years in the Atwater Federal Prison in California. While Palma was serving his sentence, the U.S. Department of the Treasury took additional measures to end his influence. On June 2, 2003, Palma was sanctioned under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, commonly known as the Kingpin Act. This act prohibited U.S. citizens and companies from doing any business with him and effectively froze all his assets in the United States. In June 2016, after serving his sentence in the United States, Palma was extradited back to Mexico. Upon his arrival, he was immediately charged with the double murder of 2 police officers in Nayarit in 1995. He is currently incarcerated at the Altiplano prison near Mexico City, one of the most secure prisons in the country. In addition to harsh prison conditions, this next drug lord was ordered to forfeit millions of dollars. Juan Manuel Salazar Alvarez. From a young age, Juan Manuel Salazar Alvarez was exposed to the brutal world of drug trafficking, and it wasn't long before he found himself entangled in the web of the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación. The Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, infamous for its violent tactics and vast drug empire, saw potential in Alvarez. His ruthlessness quickly caught the attention of cartel leaders. In Tamaulipas, Mexico, Alvarez arranged a network of couriers, stash house operators, and transportation coordinators. His operations were carefully planned, with drugs being smuggled in the most unexpected ways. Fire extinguishers, wooden blocks, car batteries, and hydraulic jacks became the vessels for multi-kilogram quantities of methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. The drugs were transported from Michoacán and Jalisco to Nuevo Laredo, and then into Laredo, Texas. Once in the U.S., the narcotics were stashed in storage units, tractor trailers, and other locations before being distributed to Houston, Dallas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and North Carolina. The scale of the operation was shocking, with the wholesale value of the drugs seized estimated to be $2.7 million. Alvarez's methods of hiding his products in plain sight made it difficult for authorities to track his operations. However, in June 2017, authorities identified him as a key leader within the cartel. This marked the beginning of a relentless investigation that would eventually bring his empire crashing down. Authorities, determined to dismantle his vast drug empire, launched a series of operations to track and monitor his every move. The investigation revealed his complex network of couriers, stash house operators, and transportation coordinators. The tireless efforts of the law enforcement officers working the case resulted in the arrest of Juan Manuel Salazar Alvarez. In a coordinated operation, authorities arrested Alvarez and several of his co-conspirators. Following his arrest, Alvarez faced extradition to the United States. On November 5, 2020, he pleaded guilty to his crimes. U.S. District Judge Diana Saldana sentenced him to 282 months in federal prison. In addition to his prison sentence, Alvarez is no doubt paying the price for his actions, but some might argue he faces a lighter sentence compared to this next drug lord. Ivan Velázquez Caballero. From a young age, Ivan Velázquez Caballero was drawn to a life of crime. By the time he was 14, he had already begun stealing cars, a common but dangerous criminal activity in Nuevo Laredo. This early exposure to crime set the stage for his future activities. At the age of 22, Velázquez Caballero's criminal activities caught up with him. He was arrested for car theft and imprisoned at La Loma Penitentiary. However, this stint in prison would prove to be a turning point in his life. Upon his release from prison, Velázquez Caballero's path crossed with Heriberto Roberto Lascano. Lascano, a key figure in the notorious Los Zetas cartel. Lascano, also known as Alaska, saw potential in the young criminal. Recognizing his ambition and ruthlessness, Lascano appointed Velázquez Caballero as the regional boss of the cartel in Nuevo Laredo. This appointment marked the beginning of Velázquez Caballero's rise within Los Zetas. As Velázquez Caballero climbed the ranks, he adopted the fearsome nickname El Taliban. The name alone struck fear into the hearts of his enemies and solidified his reputation as a ruthless enforcer. By 2007, Velázquez Caballero was commanding a group of over 400 men and overseeing various criminal operations. Under Lascano's mentorship, Velázquez Caballero honed his skills in various aspects of organized crime, from drug trafficking to money laundering. By 2009, he was listed as one of Mexico's 37 most wanted drug lords, with a 30 million pesos bounty on his head. The United States also took action, sanctioning him under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act in March 2010, freezing all his assets in the U.S. The end of Velázquez Caballero's reign came on September 26, 2012. The Mexican Navy, with intelligence from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, launched a coordinated operation to capture him. Velázquez Caballero was arrested in San Luis Potosi without firing a single bullet. He was paraded in front of cameras, handcuffed, wearing a bulletproof vest, and surrounded by masked Marines. Stacks of cash, weapons, and seized narcotics were displayed on a table in front of him. The arrest was an important victory for law enforcement, but it also marked a turning point in the power dynamics within Los Zetas. During his interrogation, Velázquez Caballero admitted that his income was around $30 million a month, although 70% of it went to operation expenses and payments for policemen, equipment, and food. In November 2013, Velázquez Caballero was extradited to the United States. He made his initial court appearance in Laredo, Texas, where he pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking and money laundering charges. The case was later transferred to McAllen, Texas. On April 7, 2014, Velázquez Caballero pleaded guilty to the charges. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison by a federal judge in Laredo, Texas. He was also ordered to forfeit $10 million in drug proceeds. After spending many years on the run and evading capture, these drug lords are now paying for their crimes in various U.S. prisons. Check out any of our other videos by clicking the cards on your screen.